the March 9th meeting of the Common Council to order at 7 o'clock. Mr. Hampton, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a reminder, seating is limited due to social distancing requirements. The public call-in number is 1-469-998-6201. When prompted, enter the following conference call ID, 342-631-867#. Ms. Lees, would you do the roll call?
Mr. Ayer. Mr. Boyce.
Present.
Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Hampton.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor.
Present.
Mr. Schwartz.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Ms. Wiles.
Present.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the February 23rd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Is a hand vote? All those in favor, raise your right hand. I need an approval of tonight's agenda.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Hand vote as well. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Petitions or comments from citizens. Mr. Jensen, would you like to? I didn't get any cards. If anybody would like to speak tonight, there's a card out front to fill out.
Make sure you fill out the card.
Make sure you fill out the card.
Big crowd.
You didn't fill out your card.
I did not.
We'll
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me regardless to come speak. I'll be very, very brief. I'm excited to announce, and it has been said on social media and otherwise, that next Tuesday, which is March 16th, from 5 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. here at City Hall, we'll be hosting a public information meeting for the Pleasant Street extension, part of our federal process as we go through the federal environmental justice process. This is all part of that. Obviously, the Pleasant Street east-west corridor has been a priority project for this council, this administration, and we are off and running. Part of that process will be these public information meetings next Tuesday, March 16th, here at City Hall. It was because of COVID-19, we want to make sure anyone, including council members, who would like to attend, which you all are welcome, we'd love to have you there, but just for head count purposes, if everyone could RSVP and sign up for that. It is a long URL address that I won't read here, but it will be up on social media and the cityofnoblesville.org webpage this evening. So you can go onto our social pages on Facebook, as well as the cityofnoblesville.org, and sign up to attend those public meetings next Tuesday night, Tuesday, March 16th here at City Hall. I'm looking forward to input as we go on this major process.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you.
Any questions for the mayor? Mr. Baldwin. You didn't fill out your card either, but thank you for coming tonight.
I can fill it out.
No, it's okay.
Thank you, Mr. President, councilors. My name's Scott Baldwin. I thought I'd stop by today and just give you a brief legislative update. We hit the 1/2, so things have slowed down. I apologize for my absence the last couple meetings. Things got to a crescendoed frenzy as we neared the end of the first half of the session. And what that typically means is that all the Senate bills have passed through the Senate committees and the third readings, and they're on their way to the House if they didn't die, and all the House bills are on their way over to the Senate. They've been assigned to a senator and a committee, and we're in the process of determining what bills of those will be heard or amended or compartmentalized with other bills, and that process is an interesting process, and that'll continue to, those bills will continue to evolve. We were able to force a few bills through that were of crucial need pretty quickly. If I look at my district inbox, I see a lot of Noblesville constituent emails surrounding COVID liability and whether businesses are going to be held liable for their actions or non-actions, and I'm proud to say that the Senate and the House have both been pretty unanimous about pushing that COVID liability bill through, and I was co-sponsor or co-author on that bill, and so I feel pretty strongly about that. For our schools, The House bill came over for the budget that's being contemplated right now. It looks as though there will be an increase for school funding, and there's a lot of dialogue to be had about that, and some of you that know me know that I've been having that dialogue, continue to be open about having that dialogue with anybody who wants to speak to me. Even if you disagree with me, I'll listen. I do feel strongly that it was important for us to make sure and fund our schools at 100%, even though there was a quirk in the law that made them only get 85% of their funding if they were virtual, and it seems like all of us were virtual, and so I'm going to fight for both public education and private education, and so happy to answer questions there as well. So the second largest thing, the second biggest number of emails in my inbox and telephone calls that come into my office are really having to do with the governor's orders. So both in the Senate and the House, there's Senate Bill 407, and I forget the House bill equivalent. There are meetings every day about this. Something is going to happen. We're trying to take a very careful look at that so that the Senate doesn't have its ability, or the House doesn't have its ability to call itself into session with impunity, because that sounds like it could be problematic for us as a state. But at the same time, ensure that there's adequate representation into each community through their legislative representatives, and I believe strongly that Senate leadership and House leadership is going to work through these issues to make certain that we'll have a bill that we'll see very soon. There are also joint resolutions being considered to currently end the governor's orders. I don't know how I feel about those yet. Some of those have second and third order connotations that I worry about a little bit. So happy to listen to anybody's concerns about those as well. And so having ongoing conversation as it relates to the Department of Transportation funding for State Road 37. There's been, as you guys know, additional costs identified, and I think that we're going to try to work through that. I've talked to Joe McGinnis at NDOT, and I've got some meetings set up with Ryan Mishler of Appropriations at the Senate, and we're hoping to come to some sort of collaborative approach to how we solve that problem. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys might have of me.
Questions for Mr. Baldwin? Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you again. We also have Jamie Yost. Is there anybody on the line who would like to speak? Nobody. Okay. We also have guests tonight, Danielle Carey Tolan and Tom Kinley, both of the trustee's office. Westfield Washington trustee and the Noblesville trustee, come on up. You don't need to fill out a card because I invited you here, so. Great, so Evelyn, Evelyn can't get too mad at me if you fill out your card. That's great, thank you.
I'm allowed to pop this off, all right?
Yeah, thank you. You can take your mask off while you speak.
It's a little easier
I
for
like the
me,
mic in
that's
your
for
pocket
sure.
there, Mr. O'Connor.
Okay, had a long day here, so I wrote down some notes so I wouldn't forget to say everything I intended to say, so bear with me on that part.
Thank you.
And first of all, I'd like to thank everyone here at the Noblesville City Council and the mayor's office for inviting Danielle and I to speak tonight in behalf of all of the trustees of Hamilton County. We're here to speak for all the trustees in Hamilton County. The trustees have been awarded a pretty good-sized grant from the Hamilton County Commissioners and approved by the council for relief for rents and utilities of individuals who are COVID affected in their family. Either they had COVID or they had someone who was sick and they had to miss work to take care of them, or their employment hours got reduced. Anything that may affect them, we can, with this grant money, we are able to catch them up on their past rents and essential utilities for people. And so anyway, we have seen a lot of people who are in this boat. And as I think most of you know, the lower end of the economic, people who are on the lower end of the economic scale have been the ones who are most affected by this. I haven't been. A lot of you haven't been, I'm sure. Maybe personally you got sick, maybe your family member got sick, but I think we've all financially pulled through. But if you worked at, say, Long John Silver's or one of the restaurants out here in town and they were closed down for many, many months, or they laid off a lot of people and you didn't have much savings, you may be so far behind in your rent that normal township assistance cannot pick you up and get you back on your feet. So that is what this grant money is used for. And, you know, there's been some question about the amount of money that we're awarded. I've seen some negative comments. I can't sit here and guarantee you that all that will be spent. Danielle, however, believes that it will be. So, but what I can guarantee you is that we will properly manage all this. And that there's been some questions and some people who have thought, well, the trustees really can't do it. But I'm certain that we can. We've already been through the process once this year. And I will guarantee you that anyone who has a need will be reached. There's no doubt about that. Anyone who has a need will be reached, and we will do our best to keep court-ordered evictions to an absolute minimum. Now think about that for a second. If people didn't have this type of assistance, there would be a lot of court-ordered evictions. That's true. And I'm certain that all the Superior Court judges appreciate that. That's not their favorite case to do. It's not a good thing for the community. So this is really, really good news for all of us. And so I'd like to let Danielle take over here, Westfield, Washington Township trustee. She has put the hard work and the effort into making this happen. She has. And so as the Hamilton County Trustee Association, Danielle is the president, and she has stepped forward to find a vehicle for which we can work through to make sure that this grant is properly administered. And so anyway, Danielle, thank you for all your hard work, and I'll let you go.
You want that paper too?
Well,
It's blank.
yeah, it is.
He said he was reading something he really wasn't. Thanks, council members. I'm Danielle Carey-Tolan, and Mayor for having me tonight. I just really wanted to go through real quick at a very high level. You can ask me questions afterwards. I'm not going to go through the document because you guys can read, right? I'm just going to tell you a little bit of what's happening and why we were awarded. So first off, in Noblesville, last year, Tom helped 546 members of your community. That equaled over almost $70,000. That's not the referrals. He also referred out over 1,400 referrals to other non-for-profits and community members. That was equaled almost $94,000. In Noblesville, you have over 5,600 renters in Noblesville. 43% of those are house burdened. Those are people that can't pay their bills on a day-to-day basis. Those are people that really are in struggling mode. They work paycheck to paycheck. They are your laborers, your hospitality workers. Those are the people that are being affected. So that just kind of gives you guys a little high number on what that is and what's going on here in Noblesville. Because obviously that's what you guys are concerned about, right? That's why I'm here. So as Tom said, the county was awarded a little over $10 million to administer rent and utility assistance for people affected by COVID. The commissioners, knowing what we do at the township level, because we do this day in and day out, chose us to administer this funds. We know the people. We're the frontline workers when people want help. So that's why they did that. We hit the ground running, obviously, with this program, and we administered a an amazing team within 24 hours. I have an implementation team. Those are the people that get the job done. Those are the people behind the scenes. Those are the people that are implementing and making things happen right now. I also have an advisory team, and that team are leaders in our Hamilton County community, whether churches, non-for-profits, and those people are helping me implement the guidelines. The guidelines are in the packet. You guys can see all that information. But then we're working closely with all the other elected officials, making sure that you guys are aware of what's happening out here. So we've reached out to over 300 community members. That is your non-for-profits, churches, and other entities within our community. And 68 of those are our partners on this program. It's pretty good. Also, we have sent a postcard, just an informational postcard to all the landlords in our community. So there's over 200, but what we could find was 200. So the landlords have gotten the information, so they know to forbear the renters, so that way, when we get this program up and running, that they will have relief. Because obviously, the landlords are hurting too. Those are the people that are paying their mortgages, that aren't getting paid their rent. So it's just a triple effect, right? Let's see here. Also, we have launched a video. I think most of you have gotten the video, so that video is going live. We have a very hard-pressed marketing campaign that we're doing, and the reason why we have focused a lot on the marketing part of it is because most of our other programs within our community and statewide don't market to our community members. So we thought it was very advantageous to make sure we put some marketing dollars, and we're going to be marketing on Latino radio stations. We're translating all of our documents in Spanish. Our website is actually translatable into 11 different languages right now. So we're hoping to get a few more, because obviously we know that there's a lot of people in our community that don't speak English. So we have Arabic, Creole, Haitian, and the list goes on. So just to give you guys a little bit of information on that. We are launching. I don't care what anybody says, and we are pulling this off. We have a state-of-the-art software program that will be doing all of the back-end monitoring. We also are employing the townships to help do quality control on the back end, just to verify that we got all the documents, because we see those documents day in, day out as townships, so we just wanted to make sure that somebody else wasn't doing that doesn't understand what we're looking for. So we are launching on March 15th, Monday, at 9 a.m. So it's going to happen. That's all I got to say. And so I'm excited for this. I'm excited for our community to have this opportunity, because the last round of stimulus money, we didn't have the opportunity for Hamilton County to have it, but because the new Treasury guidelines, we were able to get this money. So we're very lucky. Any questions?
The best way to contact your office or Tom's office?
For this program?
Email? Yeah.
Our number one thing right now for this program is to go to our website. It's hctaindiana.com. It's in the packet. My personal email for Township is also in the packet. We also have a call center that we've employed. So it's people right here in Hamilton County that's our call center. We decided to do that rather than employ it out to Arizona or New Mexico. We thought we needed to use our people here in Hamilton County because they know exactly what's happening. So,
You want to go ahead and give your email address just because it's
Yeah.
so it's on the record?
yeah,
Just for-
it's Danielle, DANIELLE, at www.township.us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, this is probably an all-encompassing answer, that's probably, how will you determine, is it case by case? Is it, okay, someone is 8 months behind rent, but we're gonna only get 5 of that? Or are you trying to catch them up to square one? Are you looking ahead? How's all that coming together?
Great question. So the Treasury already has some guidelines that we had to abide by. So they have to be a renter, they have to have a current lease, they have to be affected by COVID-19 any way possible. If they were furloughed, if they had to stay home with their kids because of schools, if the business that they worked for went out of business. So anything that was affected by COVID, their income was affected. Also, they have to be 80% or below the area median income. So those were Treasury guidelines. There's a few others, I'm not gonna go into it, but we're gonna do a max for each of the area medium incomes. And so once they hit that max, and that's another great reason of why you need to use the townships, because now we can stop gap those people. So somebody comes in and say they're $8,000 behind, because Tom and I are seeing that, and we can only help with 5,000 with this program, the townships can then step in and help or refer out for that. Does that help answer
Yep, that does help.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. President. Danielle, thanks
Yeah.
for taking this on. It's quite a task, but
Yeah.
it's, with a servant's heart you do it. So,
Yes, I do.
Do you have any idea how, if you had to estimate how many people you can serve? I was
Yep.
doing a little math and
3,000.
I came up with 4, so
Yep.
I was a little.
So if we hit the
impressed.
max with everything, we would help approximately 11% of our total Hamilton County renters. Hamilton County has a total of 26,588 renters in Hamilton County. Now, new apartments are going up daily in other communities, right? So that doesn't, that's a 2018 number from Savvy. So there's probably a couple hundred more in there, but yeah, 3,000 is our number. We're expecting about 6,000 applicants.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Tom.
Yep.
Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, you're welcome.
One real quick comment, and that is my old buddy Brian Ayer, who's not here today, and because I know Brian as well as I do, I was sort of privy to the fact that Brian was on a vacation. So I did call Brian up today. We had a good, long conversation about this whole thing. So Brian's up to speed, guys, all right?
Great,
Okay.
Good to know.
thank you. We had no doubt that he would be.
Jamie, is there anybody, or Mr. Yost? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the committee reports. Roads Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The roads met last Friday. Myself, Mark Boyce, Craig O'Connor, and Aaron Smith were all there. We talked about the street rehab projects. They will include the Country Lake Estates, North and South Harbor, Morse Overlook, among others, Old Town between Connor and Monument. There's a few alternates. If you throw alternates 1, 2, and 3 all together, they're going to kind of try to collect the alleys, 156th Street, Gray to Hazeldale, and some of Whitcomb Ridge. All of that's still being worked on. Also, we talked about the culvert over Lear Ditch. There's going to be a 21-day road closure on Greenfield Avenue that will begin March 22nd, just west of Maryland Road. Hamilton County projects, the Kerrigan Road Bridge, it's already closed March 1st. The roadway is expected to be closed for 90 days. We also talked about the waterway, which was near and dear Mr. Boyce's heart. The waterway will be closed only as needed for bridge demolition. The waterway will be closed from March 1st, so it's closed now until April 17th. And then it will be opened on weekends beginning the 17th, and an additional brief closures will be needed towards the end of the project. That's a Hamilton County project. Also, one thing that I brought up, the bridge closure has really increased traffic and changed the traffic pattern. And one thing our city engineers did point out, there's a lot of people coming on Little Chicago through South Harbor, thinking that that's quicker, but the engineers, in their wisdom, said it's far better for those folks to go on down to 38 and go east on 38 rather than cutting through South Harbor. It's a little personal as well, because my house is right on the main drag, which looks a little bit like Daytona on the third turn heading for home sometimes. But they say, the engineers, this is from the engineers, they say go on down to 38 and go that way. Pleasant Street, we talked about that. The mayor just mentioned the public meetings that are coming up. We also talked about the downtown streetscape, just more discussion on that design, and that will all continue. So it was a busy meeting, lots of topics, but those are just some of them that we talked about.
Questions for roads? I've noticed the road closures are on Facebook and social media. Is there a spot on the website where people can go to find out when roads are closed?
I
think so.
Yeah,
I
believe
assume
so,
yes,
yeah.
I think there is.
You can also check.
Emily's saying yes.
Emily's saying
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Wow. Parks.
Yes. Parks Board met March 3rd. Some exciting news. Fox Prairie is set to open March 12th, so get your clubs ready. Park restrooms are going to open April 1st, weather permitting. Big part of the discussion was the new park shelter around the carousel. Project going there, going to add some new paths, update the Tom Thumb golf putting greens a little bit. And there was also pretty exciting, at Federal Hill, there's 13 potential events going to happen there this year. So it's going to be a fun year.
Question for Mr. Schwartz. Move on to the Finance Committee.
Yes, thank you. Finance met March 4th with myself, Will Hampton, Greg O'Connor, and Megan Wiles in attendance. Brandon Bennett shared his revisions of the Parks Capital Plan update and talked about plan priorities that were not integrated into the recent capital improvement plan presented to the City Council in recent meetings. And then Mr. Spalding talked about the future of Fund 109, which is Parks Capital. And it was a review of that proposal and other options for setting aside funding for the Parks Capital projects was discussed. It was a pretty short meeting, and claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Davis? If not, can I have a motion to approve the claims?
So moved.
Second.
This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 0. All right, we'll move on to previously discussed ordinances. Council to consider ordinance 100221, an ordinance to reestablish the cumulative capital development fund tax rate. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller, and again, this is second reading for this item and the other item to follow. And as you're starting to see and realize, either myself or somebody from my office is here relatively frequently because there are a lot of procedural actions that are required on the fiscal front, and this is another one of those. As you'll recall from the last meeting, what this action does and is required under state law is for us to maintain the tax rate on our cumulative capital development fund at the 5-cent level that it currently is for 2021, to maintain that in 2022. You have to take this official action to reestablish the rate as it's defined in law, and this ordinance actually reestablishes it again at that 5-cent rate, which is the current level. If you have any questions, happy to take them.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding? If there are none, I would like to open up the public hearing.
Mr. President, seeing no one come forth for the public hearing, I would move that we close it.
Second.
Second, there's a hand vote. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, raise your right hand. 8-0. I would entertain a motion.
President, I would move that we approve ordinance number 10-02-21 as presented.
This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees. We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 10-02-21. Roll call.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Next is council to consider ordinance 110221, an ordinance to reestablish the fire cumulative capital fund tax rate. Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the council, as I alluded to with the last item, this second item is again another procedural action exceedingly similar to the first item, except it is a different city fund that we have that has slightly different eligible purposes. And in the case of this ordinance, we're setting the tax rate in the ordinance at 2 cents, not 5 cents. There's different sets of rules around it. And I will mention with this one, but it all is also relevant to the last one, none of these actions kind of change the overall tax rate that you would adopt at budget time. This is, again, very procedural and required really by state law to be done outside the budget process, and so that's why we're doing it now. But as I said, this is another cumulative capital fund that requires this same process for the rate setting.
Are there any questions for Mr. Spalding? If there are none, I will open up the public hearing for ordinance 110221.
Mr. President, seeing no one from the public coming forward, I'd move that we close the public hearing for ordinance 11-2-21.
Second.
The hand vote, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, raise your right hand. 8-0.
Mr. President, I'd make a motion that we approve ordinance 11-2-21 as submitted.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance 110221. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
8-0, or 8 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the council is to consider ordinance 120221, an ordinance amending the city's noise ordinances as amended. Lindsay Bennett.
Good evening, Council. Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. Have a second reading tonight of the noise ordinance that I presented last week. As we discussed last week, I made a few changes. Changed this from Section 159, which was in the UDO, over to Chapter 93, which is more under nuisances and probably more appropriate for this particular section. I did make a couple of changes as far as making sure that the RUOF section stayed with the RUOF section, and then this is a brand new section 93.25. So it's still a little clunky, but I think for our purposes it will work, and we'll just make sure that the police department knows there is a RUOF section and a rest of the city section. A couple of other changes that we talked about that I made in section 12 of the exemptions for construction noise. I did change it to 10 p.m., which was consistent with our old ordinance instead of 9 p.m. And then President Peterson, I changed the fines to reflect a little bit higher fine for commercial and in the industrial districts. And then also clarified that the violation is deemed to occur where the noise is generated, made, caused, amplified, or emitted, so that if you have those commercial residential districts butting up against each other, it's where the noise comes from, not necessarily where the noise is heard. Happy to answer any questions that you may have on this one.
Any questions? I would need a motion to amend ordinance 120221.
Mr. President, I would move that we amend ordinance 12-02-21 as presented.
There's a hand vote to amend ordinance 120221.
President, I would move that we approve ordinance 1202-21 as amended.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance 120221 as amended. Ms. Lees.
O'Connor, or excuse me, Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles,
Aye.
Mr. Boyce,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Aye, 0 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Council to consider ordinance 140321, an ordinance amending chapter 3203 and 3212 of the city's code of ordinances. Lindsay Bennett.
Thank you, Council President Peterson.
Hang on a second. I need
Introduce.
Sorry,
Now
I jumped the
begin,
gun again. Just for the record, Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. This ordinance was originally opened up just to allow us to put economic development projects ahead of unfinished business in the event that maybe we have some people from out of town who need to get going. And then, as frequently happens, as we start reviewing, we realize there might be some things that we need to update. So that's what this ordinance does. Ms. Lees was kind enough to review the ordinance for current practice. She and I met, and we both reviewed for compliance with Indiana code. So the changes that you see are both to reflect current practice and Indiana code. You might notice that it jumps from like Rule 3 to Rule 8. That just means that we didn't touch Rules 4 through 7. So the only ones that we made any changes to are actually in this ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I would respectfully request that you pass on first reading.
Any questions for Ms. Bennett?
I just had one, Mr. President. I think this was your amendment, which I like it, but I'm just trying to clarify. Rule 9, the presiding officer may request it's basically trying to change the order at your request, at the president's request of the voting.
So the intent, and Ms. Lees and I are still working through this, the intent is to, so that every meeting doesn't start with alphabetically the first person. So we would try to rotate that through that or move that a little bit. It would still be alphabetical. It's not intended to be random. It's not intended to be arbitrary. We will have a system to it, whether we start with a new person each week and rotate through it or start where we left off, but just some way to kind of make it a little more fair on who votes first. That's the intent, and if we don't like it, we can, at an organizational meeting, we can end it.
But you haven't yet determined how you're going to start it.
It's going to be one of those two. So
Okay.
before we do it, I will run it around and see what everybody thinks.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, the idea as the drafter was just to allow for that to occur so that Mr. Peterson could make those changes and then we can adjust as he needs to. But they're your rules.
So that Mr. Ayer doesn't open every meeting with the
Right.
first
That's
vote.
the intent.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
I'd like to vote first one.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you.
So we have a request to waive the rules.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I'd make a motion that we waive the rules and pass on first reading ordinance 14-3-21.
I'll second that.
The hand vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 8-0.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I'd move that we approve ordinance 14-03-21 as submitted.
Second.
There is a motion to approve ordinance 140321 and a second. It's a roll call vote.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Council to consider ordinance 150321 and ordinance amending chapter 5103 of the city's Code of Ordinances. Lindsay Bennett.
Motion to introduce?
All right. For the record, Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. As you probably recall, in July of 2020, council made an adjustment to sewer and trash utility rates, and as part of that ordinance, council also increased the sewer credit and trash credit. The increase was from $10 a month to $12 a month for eligible sewer customers and 50% for trash. There was also a new category that was created for utility customers who have experienced hardship due to COVID. And in that ordinance, there was an expiration date for the hardship credit of February 28th, 2021. This ordinance simply extends that expiration date to December 31st, 2021 for both the sewer credit and the trash credit. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is there a timing issue with this, Lindsay?
When does it expire?
Does it expire?
The 28th.
February 28th, if we can pass, yeah, if we're able to do that, then yeah, we can apply the credits to March's billing. Okay. Deputy Mayor Light was just informing that the March bills will go out at the end of March. So if you don't waive for a first reading, then we can still catch it for a second reading.
Is that a request?
Yes,
Okay, thank
I
you.
would request that you do pass on first reading.
Thank you. And one question I had too, this is not an overlap with the trustees program. This is a completely separate.
Right.
support.
After hearing the trustees' information, it sounds like they're focused more on renters. This is for owner occupants only, as that's who our account holders are the owner
Okay.
occupants.
Thank you. Questions? We have a request to waive the rules and pass this on the first reading.
President, I would move that we waive the rules and pass ordinance 150321 on first reading.
Second.
Hand vote to waive the rules and approve on first reading, 140321. This is a hand vote. Thank you. 8-0, it passes.
Mr. President,
Yes, Ms.
I
Wiles?
would move that we approve ordinance number 1503-21 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion to approve 150321 and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Schwartz? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye. Thank you.
Aye, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Council.
On the miscellaneous number 1, council to consider acceptance of a conflict of interest disclosure from Darren Peterson. So it's in your packet. There is my Elements Engineering was hired as a subconsultant for Finch Creek Park. Elements Engineering is owned by my wife. She had that contract before we really even dated, I think.
Yeah.
And there, because of a land situation out there, they have been re-engaged to evaluate some issues at the parks. And she's been rehired, so this is kind of a disclosure of that conflict. Any questions?
I would move acceptance of the conflict of interest disclosure.
Second.
I'll do it. There's a motion to accept the conflict of interest disclosure in a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those abstaining, raise your right hand. Are there any council comments?
Mr. President,
Mr.
I
O'Connor?
was gonna ask the mayor how the fan jam, how did
Yeah.
how did
Hoops
that
at the
go
Hill.
on Saturday?
Oh,
Great
wow.
question. I should have probably mentioned that in the outset. Kudos to our Parks Department. We had over 100 cars drive through, so hopefully some of you did. We had, Pacers Boomer was out there, Freddie Fever was out there, Colts cheerleaders, the Miller Man, Miller cheerleaders, Butler Blue, and Hank the Bulldog. So we had quite a crew. It was Chamber of Commerce weather as well, so that's just kicking off the month of March. We also have going throughout the entire month, if you'll see on the square downtown Noblesville, there are QR codes there that you can scan and enter your information and then be entered into a drawing for $25 gift cards to a downtown business as a way to support them. And then on March 20th from noon to 8 will be our watch party with with food trucks and a beer garden and a 17-foot by 10-foot screen at Federal Hill Commons. So we invite you to come watch the games with your friends and family, all in accordance with CDC guidelines and the Hamilton County Health Department. Thank you.
And I just had a follow-up to that, just kudos to you and the entire administration and the marketing and communications team for putting that together. It's a great connect to a once-in-a-lifetime event that's coming to our state, and it's just good work to do that connection, so thank you, and thank you.
Any other council comments? So moved.